thank you to all of you for coming out on this beautiful Saturday morning. This is a very, very valuable time and a critical time in our community. I want to thank our candidates for being here today. I know that each of us are here because we want to make a very learned decision about the next 4 years for our community. We believe in democracy. We believe in a fair and open process, and that's what we'll have here today. This will be a dialogue amongst the leaders in our community to ask questions and to provide us with their policy positions as well as their visions for the ward. We do have a format that will lend itself to feedback and interaction between the candidates and each of you. Now, I know that I'm in a very distinguished body of residents and family and friends, so we're going to make sure that we conduct ourselves in a way that we can be most proud of. The format is such. We will have a 2-minute opening statement by each of the candidates. They will be presenting themselves in the order in which they will appear on the ballot. There will be rapid-fire questions that will be presented, as well as questions that have been derived from the Planning Coalition. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to respond to those questions. Our timekeepers here in the front, and we'll be very mindful and respectful of time, as well as we will afford the candidates to ask one question of the other, and they will be given 2 minutes to respond to that. From there, we want to hear from you. We hope that each of you have taken a card. They're color-coded, pink for ladies, blue for men. Please write your question down. If you would like to also identify yourself, we will have the candidates pull. Again, we're keeping this a very democratic and transparent process, so therefore we will pull those cards and they will be presented and they will respond in a 2-minute fashion and then a 1-minute closing statement. Please, and I know I need not say this, any emotion that you may have, whether jubilation or that of discontent, I hope that you will keep that to yourself and maybe express that on your way home, because we want to keep this forum to be, again, very professional and very community-centered. So again, without further ado, we'll get started. Our first question will be to Mr. Mitchell. Oh, I'm sorry, right, introduction of each of the candidates. If you start off, Mr. Mitchell.
Testing. Good morning, everybody. For those of you who I didn't personally shake your hand in this morning, I will make sure I do that this afternoon. That's one of the things about running. I like to be personally engaged with all the constituents. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Greg Mitchell. I was born and raised in the southeast end of the ward in the neighborhood of Jeffrey Manor, located in the South Dearden community. One of my campaign slogans was born here, stays here, raised there. And that is not just a campaign slogan. That's actually a responsibility. And the responsibility I have is that I've been here for so long that as your next alderman, I'm compelled to make decisions that would be in the best interest of this ward. The decisions I make would come from my heart, and it would lay the foundation for the future. I went to Kenwood Academy. I graduated in '87 from Kenwood Academy. I went to went off to Grambling State University, where I majored in computer information systems, accounting, and finance. From there, after graduation, I went on to work for the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, where I worked for 22 years, and I had worked in various positions of progressive responsibility, from auditing all the way to leadership positions in management. All of that experience that I've garnered over the years, I feel will lend itself well to come back to my home and steward the ward. As you guys know, and I'm sure we'll hear it in the questions, we have a lot of issues in the ward. Issues that my business background, my personal ties, my personal ties, and would lend itself well to addressing. So I hope you guys get a better feel of me after this, have a better feel of me after this forum, and I look forward to speaking with you later on today.
Greetings, residents of the magnificent 7th Ward. I am Alderman Natashia Holmes, and I've been your alderman for the past 2 years, and change doesn't happen overnight. It happens block by block. No, I wasn't born here. No, I wasn't raised here. But guess what? When I chose to purchase my first home ever in life, I moved here because this is where I wanted to be. I'm very proud of the accomplishments that we've been able to get done over the past 2 years. And what I want to do is continue to move the 7th Ward forward. Yes, I went to undergraduate at Alabama State. I went to graduate school at Auburn. I moved to the Chicagoland area, and I've worked in various policy and leadership positions that have allowed me to gain and hone the type of necessary skills that an alderman needs. So I've been very happy to serve you, and I want to continue doing that. We have to work together as a community to make things happen. It's not one person that makes the change, it's all of us together. And as we remember, historic moments that have happened over the course of history, including us just celebrating, what happened on the Pettus Bridge in Selma. Let's remember that it's a movement that makes change. It's not just one person. So on April 7th, or if you want to early vote on March 23rd, don't fall for any of these old political tricks. Just punch 56.
Thank you so much. Also, I want to call your attention to CAN TV is with us today. They are recording today's forum, and it will be broadcast next week. Thank you so much to the Planning Coalition for arranging that. If you signed in and you provided your email address, we'll make sure that we provide you with the date and time that this will air, and we will proceed now with the forum. Our first question will be presented to Mr. Mitchell, who appears on the ballot first. As a resident and as a leader in the community, what do you consider to be the top 3 issues of the 7th Ward, and what are your plans to address them? You have 2 minutes.
The top 3 issues, as I see it, and as communicated to me from neighbors to whom I've spoken with, is 1, the public safety, the organizational structure of the Aldermanic office, and economic development. How I plan, in no particular order, how I plan to address those. For those of you I have spoken with, I talked to you about one of the first things I want to do when I become alderman is to implement an organizational structure that would lend itself well to addressing or responding to constituents' concerns, inquiries for information and things like that. Right now, from the feedback I've gotten from my neighbors, that is not the case. You make 5 different phone calls to the Aldermanic office, you get 5 different experiences. One may be good, the other 4 may be bad. That cannot happen. I have a corporate background that I had to manage the help desk, and that was the number 1 priority. You take care of your customers. Number 2, the public safety. There's a lot of things that fall under public safety, so we have to break it down. Got to get real granular with it. Abandoned and foreclosed property. Okay. Abandoned and foreclosed property is an eyesore in the community. It's been a place where arson has taken place, squatters, drug activity. Well, the first thing I want to do with respect to that is to identify those structures that can be utilized for homes, and to work with the city to try to get investors in and fix them up and to make them livable, to put homeowners in there. So that's one of the things I want to do. With respect to economic development, we have a lot of assets throughout the 7th Ward. And from those, so I want to arrange those assets in a portfolio, listing all their characteristics and qualities, and I want to present those to potential partners and potential investors. Thank you.
Same question, Alderman Holmes. What do you consider to be the top 3 issues of the ward, and what are your plans to address them?
So obviously, top 3 issues would be, safety, economic development, and making sure our schools, our neighborhood schools, have the necessary resources. So with regard to safety, I work closely with both the commander in the 3rd and 4th district, and I have someone in my office who attends all the CAPS meetings between both of those 2 districts. With regard to economic development, we've seen our thoroughfares, our neighborhood thoroughfares, such as 75th, 79th, Exchange Avenue, 83rd, and 95th deteriorate over the years. So I have begun a process where I'm engaging investors, bankers, experts, if you will, to come to the table and to really listen to the community. We are having the second phase of this forum will be next week on March 19th, and it's an opportunity to kind of discuss what retailers look at, but also what the community wants. And I think bringing resources to our neighborhood schools. Most of our neighborhood schools are level 1 or level 1 plus. We probably only have like 2 schools in the ward, and a couple of those were just recently mapped in that aren't level 1 or level 1 plus. So making sure that our neighborhood schools have the resources that they need.
Please, if you've not already submitted a card, Walt is walking around with a basket. Please do so that when we proceed to that portion of the program, we'll be able to include your commentary as well. Thank you. Our next question will be presented to Alderman Holmes first. According to a recent report by the Chicago Tribune, the 7th Ward has the 3rd highest concentration of CHA voucher choice holders. How do you plan to address the ongoing issues with CHA, and what is your plan for affordable housing in the 7th Ward?
Well, let me start by first saying that there's affordable housing in the 7th Ward, and that is why we have so many voucher holders who have chosen to live here. It is a choice voucher that is issued by the CHA. And, you know, while you can live in the 7th Ward with your voucher, you have to travel elsewhere to get to work. So I was a part of the Affordable Requirements Ordinance Rewrite Task Force. And basically that provides incentives for developers who want to utilize city dollars or city land. It allows them to be able to build housing and have an affordable requirement with that. A part of the rewrite of that ordinance, you know, presents an opportunity for communities like ours to gain better opportunities when development comes along. And unfortunately, again, in the time frame that I'm given, I can't really explain all the details, but you know, I think that we are in an opportunity now with this new Affordable Requirements Ordinance to be able to address those issues. You know, I held a housing forum in October, and it started off being just a rental forum and then a landlord's tenant forum. And then it moved to a housing forum because I don't want to stigmatize anyone because of their socioeconomic status. So yes, we do have, actually we're the 2nd largest area in the city that has CHA choice voucher holders. But what we need to address on a larger issue is that people be able to live where they want to live instead of going to a place where they have to live because that's all they can afford with their voucher.
Same question, Mr. Mitchell.
Please repeat it again.
Sure.
Thanks.
According to a recent Chicago Tribune study, the 7th Ward has the 3rd highest concentration of CHA voucher choice holders. How do you plan to address the ongoing issues with CHA, and what is your affordable housing plan for the ward?
So the ongoing issues with the choice voucher holders, as has been communicated to me and as I have experienced it throughout the ward, is the behaviors of both the participants and the lack of accountability of the investors or the property owners. The one thing I would like to do is to work with CHA staff to make sure that the CHA voucher holders are held accountable, because there are certain requirements that go with the voucher. They also hold the investors or the property owners accountable, because they are also to be held under certain requirements. And those things include like keeping the property keeping the property clean and presentable in the neighborhoods and things like that. So those are the 2 things I would work with the CHA to do. How we would address the low You said the
Affordable housing plan.
So I actually agree with there is an abundance of low-income housing within the 7th Ward. I want to make sure that as we grow, as the 7th Ward grows, that we continue to have that in our minds to continue to create affordable housing for future residents.
Thank you. Starting with Mr. Mitchell. Given the fact that Chicago has 2 seasons, winter and construction, and we just concluded winter, hopefully, and now we're transitioning into construction. How do you plan to allocate it as alderman, the $1.3 million that the ward receives in capital improvement dollars, and do you support participatory budgeting?
Excellent question. Yes, I absolutely support a participatory budget process. As a matter of fact, for those of you who've spoken with me throughout the campaign, that is one of the biggest things I want to bring to the ward. Government is supposed to be about inclusion and not exclusion, so therefore I want to have that participatory budget process. And how I will do it is this. The 7th Ward is divided between four areas, 4 communities. You have South Shore, South Chicago, Calumet Heights, and South Deering. I would seek to bring representatives from each area of the ward, bring their wish list, and we all sit down and talk about the things that they want in their respective communities. We will sit, we will prioritize what can be done, what time frames, and open it up to a very engaging experience. So when we walk away from the meeting, we know what blocks are getting lights, who's getting this, who's getting that, and people won't feel like, Greg is on certain blocks is only getting certain attention because Greg is the alderman. I want it to be a fair process, and I want it to be a consistent process.
Sure. Do you support participatory budgeting, and how do you plan to allocate the capital improvement funds that are allocated to each ward?
So as was mentioned, every alderman gets $1.3 million to do capital improvement programs in their ward. When you have wards that are extremely large, like the 7th Ward, which extends basically from 71st Street to 107th Street, we have over 350, 375, 400 blocks of capital improvements that need to be done. My background is that I used to program federal funding for local surface transportation projects, and I've taken what I've done in that prior experience and applied it to the Aldermanic menu process. So, participatory budgeting, when it's called out and it's given this name of participatory budgeting, that there's a process, like, that's what it is. When you make a request to my office with regard to some capital improvement that needs to be done, it becomes a part of our list. If it can become a part of the current menu, we add it in. If it becomes a part of a menu that is the next year, we add it in. What I think the bigger question is, and the bigger issue is that wards like the 7th Ward, the 9th Ward, the 8th Ward, the 10th Ward, where we have a lot of area to cover, there needs to be an adjustment in how the Aldermanic menu is actually appropriated to aldermen. We have aldermen on the north side who can use their menu money for murals. Well, we can't do that over here because we have so much infrastructure that needs to be dealt with. So the larger issue there is dealing with how the monies are appropriated from the city, the state, and the federal level, not just, we're gonna answer your request in my office. That's, participatory budgeting, that's just something that they're, putting out there to get people riled up. The bigger issue is how we allocate those funds at a larger level. Thank you.
So just a follow-up to that question. Given the fact that we know that there are a range of projects, infrastructure projects that will be taking place this summer, whether it's through the utility projects or capital improvement, what are your plans as far as notification of residents so that we don't just discover our sidewalks are being torn up or streets are being redirected? How do you plan, both of you, to educate residents about the plans for capital improvement projects?
So from my office, let me say this. We have a range of ways of how we reach out to people. We do robocalls, we do text messaging, we do the web, and we do handheld flyers. And we've done that over the course of the past 2 years that I've been alderman. So while we may not reach you through one venue, we reach you through another venue. The second is when the utility companies and other agencies are doing work, they do the notification themselves. They actually have people come out and flyer the neighborhood. Most of you are aware of things that have happened over the course of the past year. We've had a lot of work with water and sewer throughout the northern part of the ward. That is going to continue to move out through the southern part of the ward. And we've made sure that if you didn't get the notification, and if you did get a ticket or anything like that, we've addressed that issue. So we are definitely making sure that you are aware of the situation that is happening on your block and in your neighborhood. And at the same time, we are also making sure that if there are any infractions that occur because of that, whether it be on the utility provider side or our side, we make sure to handle that.
Any improvement that is going to take place in the 7th Ward has to be planned. So if it's planned, we can plan to discuss it, bring it to the residents' attention in weekly ward meetings, quarterly state of the ward meetings, and things like that. Information dissemination of information is very vital to this community. Once again, as I spoke with a lot of residents in the ward, they feel that information is not disseminated timely, it's not disseminated effectively, and sometimes it's not even reliable. It's outdated, things like that. We want to put a stop to that. This is the information age. We can post, we will have it posted on websites. We would post it through potential robocalls. But for the most part, we're going to utilize every form of technology as well as personal engagement to let the residents know what is being done. I'll give you an example. Like 2 weeks ago, there was a pipe that burst on 83rd Street. The city of Chicago came down the street and started to repair it. Well, no one was notified on the block, and this was 83rd and Saginaw. The pipe was, they opened it up, more flooding took place, and it was an ice rink on 83rd and Saginaw. That cannot happen, that is unacceptable. People couldn't even go to work. Under my administration, the communication and dissemination of information would almost be like clockwork. You have to get the information out, inform the residents, that is our responsibility, and there's no way around it.
Thank you so much. We're going to transition to another portion of the program that is considered rapid fire. Each of you will be asked to answer a question just in a yes or no format as we proceed through these public policy issues. We recognize that not only is the alderman the custodian of city services, but also has to legislate in a larger context pertaining to matters that affect the entire city of Chicago. So again, these are issues that we'd like a yes or no response from each of you. Eliminating red light cameras, yes or no? Elected.
Yes or no really allows people to understand.
Can you speak it to the mic so that we can hear you?
I don't think a yes or no answer really allows people to address the issue of what red light cameras are, and how they are being affected in the city.
Elected school board.
Can I say something there? Guys, that was a quick no, because in its current form, no. We can always come back to the table and revisit it and implement it in a more prudent way. That's why it was yes.
Very good. Elected school board.
Yes.
I think that there should be a process where there's there should be a vetting process, and that's my stance on the elected school board.
Single room occupancy buildings, SROs.
Entire buildings, single room?
SROs.
No.
Absolutely.
Community benefits agreement for the Lakeside Development Project.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Charter school expansion in the ward.
Oh, go ahead.
Charter school expansion in the ward?
Because I've spoken with many residents that like the choice between neighborhood schools and charter schools, I would say yes.
Yes to charter schools expansion.
I would say at this point, not unless there's been an examination of how our neighborhood schools are working.
So, again, these are weighted issues, so we do want to allow for there to be commentary, but we would like for you to speak into the affirmative as to whether you are in support or not, or to state that you need to do further examination of the topic. Whether or not there would be a moratorium on TIFs for the city of Chicago in the 7th Ward.
No.
No.
Special service areas, SSAs for the 7th Ward. Additionally, no, whether or not we should have additional SSAs for the 7th Ward.
I spent a lot of time over the past 2 years straightening out a lot of problems with the SSA that currently exists, and until that SSA is up and running and functioning in the way that it should, no. But once it is, then I am looking at the time for expansion, the expansion for SSA on 95th Street.
We're now going to, thank you so much for that. We're now going to transition into our questions from each of you. Now keep in mind, we will not, by any means possible, be able to answer all the questions that were submitted. We're going to do this in a fair process, which allows each of the candidates to pull their own questions, so they'll be picking their own poison. So we now have the basket coming forward. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to the question in which they draw, and we will have the question read, as well as if you indicated your name, we'll reveal that as well.
Turn it.
I'll pick yellow first instead of the pink. Let me just say. Nope, I can get it for you.
Okay, this question is for Alderman Holmes. You were appointed by the mayor to serve as a 7th Ward alderman. What role did you play in the 7th Ward prior to your appointment? That's one. Why didn't you run for alderman during the post-election? Okay, let's just deal with the first one while I make out the rest of this penmanship.
So first of all, before I was appointed alderman, in the 7th Ward particularly, number one, I serve as a president of my condo association, and number two, I ran and won a seat as community representative on the local school council for Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Padilla Academy, which is located on 75th and South Shore. And most people always ask, like, you don't have any kids, like, why would you run for school council? And the reason why I did it was because of the fact that I come home every day and I'd see all these kids walking in the neighborhood. And for me, it's about making sure that the children in my community where I live are getting a high quality education. And Powell is a level 1+ school.
Thank you so much. We have some doctors in the room because this penmanship, I want you all to know, is quite extravagant. Okay, this question is for Greg. What would you do to ensure that landlords are held accountable and responsible for their properties, the maintenance, and physical upkeep?
So I actually touched on a little bit of that when I addressed the CHA. So to reiterate that for those structures that are investor-owned, that are rented out to the Section 8 holders, work with CHA to hold the investors as well as the tenants accountable for their behaviors and the upkeep of their property. One of the things that I've spoken about was to try to put a beautification ordinance in place where it would hold property owners, investors accountable for the upkeep of their property. We have a lot of property throughout the ward that are owned by investors. So as a beautification effort, we don't want them to go away back to suburbs or wherever and not to do anything about the property. We want to hold them accountable, keep the grass cut, keep the roof done, maintenance, regular maintenance, and once again, responsible for the behaviors of the tenants. Because in certain neighborhoods throughout the 7th Ward, you have drug activity in certain homes where they are renting. That needs to be addressed. We have people selling cigarettes, loose cigarettes out. That activity has to be addressed. If that ordinance is effective, we will effectively minimize as well as ultimately stop those type of activities by holding the investors, the banks, everybody else accountable for their property.
Thank you. Next question is for Alderman Holmes. What are your plans for bringing in more businesses to the 7th Ward, such as major stores and a youth center?
Well, number one, we do have a youth center, the Rebecca Crown Center, and last year we were able to work with People's Gas to get a lot of, to get that facility updated. And so that's something I'm very proud of that we're doing. We all want more youth centers across the ward and across the entire city, but what we have to do is build the capacity in the 7th Ward to be able to handle that. You know, when we think about what we have here in terms of 501c3s, we really don't have that many. And you really need a 501c3 in order to leverage funding for some of these things that we want in our neighborhoods. What was the other part of the question?
Your plan to bring in businesses.
Oh yeah, businesses, okay. So, you know, I have this fight every single day of my life and every single day since I've been living here. You know, when I first moved here, like I said, I chose here. And I tried to just shop in the 7th Ward, and I found myself only having options, Dominic's and Sears, and both of those options are gone now. So it's been a struggle. We live in an area of the city that has a $400 million retail gap. So how I'm trying to address that is I'm bringing retailers and investors to the table, and I'm bringing the communities to the table, because I think we have to hear what they're saying and they have to hear what we're saying in terms of what we need and what we want and how we spend our money. You know, it's our buying power that, you know, allows these companies to exist. And so when we recognize that it's our buying power, we have the bigger stake, and it's a matter of making investors and retailers appreciate that. I cannot shop all day at the store on 76 and Coles, but if everybody else in the room is going there, they're going to stay in business. And so it's about all of us being vigilant in terms of making sure that we are addressing our buying power.
Next question for Mr. Mitchell. Do you believe the city government should negotiate with ASME to solve the city's pension funding issue?
Because of the ramifications of any changes that the city would make toward the employees or people that's employees or the people that's part of ASME, they would have to, in good faith, negotiate any changes, any alterations in their current agreement. It's about fairness. If there's an agreement on the table, you know, it's not fair to just change things without a fair negotiation. So the city should.
Okay, and in follow-up to that, both of you, given the pension crisis that we're facing as a city and the ongoing conversations about how we will address the budgetary crisis, what are your plans and what's your position on a property tax increase? Both of you, 1 minute.
Okay. A property tax increase should not be the first or the only alternative to address the issue. As a matter of fact, I think it should be the last. But as Alderman, which would represent my constituency, when I'm representing them down at City Hall, I would definitely make it known that this is not one of the avenues that we would like to take. However, it did come down to that, I would be responsible to talk to my constituency and get their feedback and also represent them down at City Hall. But we need to come out with other creative ways to generate revenue revenue that is sustainable, that's reoccurring, and that's effective. Ideas that I have on the table, we're giving a lot of subsidies to corporations. Now, I'm all in favor of corporations, getting corporations to relocate to the city of Chicago. I love it. But are we giving them too much to relocate? Are we leaving too much on the table? We should look at that any more in depth and to see, if we're giving somebody hypothetically numbers, you're giving them 10 million over 5 years, maybe we should give them 10 million over 10 years. It frees up money present day.
Thank you. Same question, Alderman Holmes. To address the budgetary crisis and the pension crisis that we face, what is your position on a property tax increase and other solutions to address the budget?
Well, one of the big things that I've been fighting for, not only just as alderman, just as always being a government employee, is finding ways to make government more efficient. I always tell the story that, when I started working at IDOT, they didn't have voicemail, they still had the rotary dial phones, and so we have to find those efficiencies in how we operate as a governmental body. So that would be first. I think when we look at, first of all, and as a person who is vested in the state of Illinois system, we're going to have to look at ways to address the pension crisis in a variety of revenue increasing ways. And so I won't say a property tax is going to definitely happen. I can't speak to that because I don't know if that's the case, but there are going to be shared sacrifices across the board in order to make sure that we uphold the constitutional right for folks to get a government pension.
Thank you so much. This will be our final set of questions from the audience, and then we will transition to questions that you present to one another, and then your closing statements. Our next question is to Alderman Holmes. Have you changed your opposition to a community benefits agreement relating to lakeside development?
I have always been in favor of a community benefits agreement. I think that what everyone has to understand is, I actually was meeting with one of the former candidates, and she mentioned the community benefits agreement. And I said, she said, well, you're not in favor of that one. And I'm like, when you have an agreement come before you, if someone gives you a document, are you just gonna sign it? Are you gonna read it? Are you gonna do some research, find out how it's been implemented in other places, find out how it's been implemented in the city? Are you gonna do that? And she was taken aback because, I think when we talk about an agreement, you have people coming to the table to agree to a set of terms. And you want to make sure that everyone at the table agrees to those terms. I've said this from the start of my life and being alderman, is that, good policy doesn't come from consensus. Good policy comes from making sure that everyone is at the table and that you're making something that is going to be the best for everybody around. So it's not just about the politics of it, it's about the policy of it. And so, with the community benefits agreement, actually my current stance is that I think the development is so far off. 20, 30 years. And there are things that are going to happen over that course of 20 or 30 years. And I think that every component that happens at Lakeside should have a community benefits agreement. You can't just put a community benefits agreement in place for something that's going to happen 30 years from now, because there are a lot of things that are going to change 30 years from now. But every project that happens, there should be a community benefits agreement for every project that happens at Lakeside, not just for the Lakeside development one-shot deal.
Okay, our last question from the audience is for Greg. What would you do to bridge the disconnect between the southern and northern portions of the ward?
Considering I'm from the most southern end of the ward, the bridging of the gap starts with me. And I bring, for the things that I want to incorporate, and I spoke with certain organizations about this, I want to bring everybody to the table. I want an environment that's engaging, collaborative, and there are things that I think it's important to bridge the gap, because as an alderman, the ward is so large. And to pay attention to the entire ward, I have to get understanding. There's issues that happen up in South Shore that doesn't exist in, say, South Deering. So how I bridge that gap? Through communication. through constant communication and having those state of the ward meetings where I can talk to the entire ward about the things that are happening. So South Shore knows about the things that's going on in Cal Heights, so they can get an understanding. So South Deering knows about the things that's going on in South Chicago. My whole point in Alderman, I want to be a community alderman. I want to be a neighborhood alderman. I want to know everything that's going on in the ward. I want to be boots on the ground. And from those boots on the ground, any and all information I get, I want to disseminate through the ward so everyone understands. And that lends itself well when we go to the participatory budgeting process to understand why that $1.3 million don't go a long way.
Thank you. So if we did not get to your question, we do apologize, but please hold on to it. Make sure that you have an opportunity to talk with the candidates between now and Election Day, but thank you so much for your participation in that process. We're now going to allow the candidates to ask one question of one another. So we will start with Alderman Holmes.
Are you going to move to the 7th Ward if you become alderman?
Okay.
Interesting. Considering we go through the petition process and my address is in the 7th Ward, I've been living in the 7th Ward all my life.
You actually are in the 10th Ward.
No, I got redistricted to the 10th Ward,
Yeah.
which if you
So
read
my question was,
if
are you going to
read
move to the 7th Ward?
Yes, I've already purchased a home in the 7th Ward. Now I got the question.
Very good. Greg, your question to Alderman Holmes.
I have two questions. Which ones?
You only have one.
No, I said which
Okay.
one should I pick? In August of this year, 8th Ward Alderman Michelle Harris went to Pat Quinn and talked to him about getting money to improve the storm drain system. From our understanding, you were privy to that. You did not go to the table. Michelle, in turn, is the only ward that has $3 million from the government to improve storm drain systems. And you know that in areas like South Deering, Cal Heights, South Chicago, and certain parts of South Shore, there's a flooding issue. Why wouldn't you, as alderman, as the steward of this neighborhood, think enough of the residents in their flooded basements to go to the table and try to get money to improve the storm drain system?
So, to correct your statement, I was not privy to any conversations that Alderman Harris and Pat Quinn had with regard to any funding or any issues regarding stormwater. What I have been doing is I've been working with another organization, which is the Center for Neighborhood Technology, and they actually want to do a study of areas in the city, and particularly in South Shore and in Calumet Heights, with regard to flooding. So we actually are working with them right now, and we've also been working with the residents in Calumet Heights, particularly on their water issues, and have had even just over the course of this past month, the water department has been doing underground research on some of the issues to address whether or not the stormwater system or the sewage system needs to be redone, or if there are ways to infill some of the gaps in the system. So that has been done. So, just to, your question was about like, why wasn't I at the table? Well, I never was invited to a table to have that discussion, number one. And number two, we are addressing those issues. And I'd just like to add, and I have 30 seconds to do this, that, a lot of the issues that have come before my office have been long-term issues that haven't been addressed. We spent the last 2 years addressing issues that have come up over the course of the last 20 to 30 years. And we are taking a strong approach in making sure that we are reaching out and understanding the issues and the problems and making sure they get addressed. So, when there's an opportunity for me to be at the table to discuss issues of funding and how they can be trickled down to my ward, I've been there. And especially since you grew up in the Jeffrey Manor area, 54321, there are a lot of Works Progress Administration streets down there, and I've been working with the congressman on ways to address that at a federal level because we don't have that money at the city level.
Thank you so much. I'm going to take moderator liberty and just ask for one final set of rapid fires. We're going to start with Mr. Mitchell. Ron for mayor, yes or no?
No.
Yes.
They didn't hear. This is the last one. That was the last one. In your closing statements, there were two matters that didn't get addressed that you referenced in your three main issues facing the 7th Ward. One was education, and the other was economic development and jobs. If you would not mind, in your closing statement, to include your plan to address the school system. Today in the Sun-Times, there was an announcement by the district about the selling of 3 of the closed school buildings. We were affected in the war by those closures. Any plans for repurposing, as well as we transition into summer, we know that jobs and keeping our young people safe and engaged is critical. So in these last 60 seconds that each candidate is afforded, would you please make reference to those plans on education and job creation? Thank you so much. I'm sorry, we're going to start with Alderman Holmes.
Number one, we were not extremely affected by the school closings. And with repurposing, let's be very clear what the school closings addressed. It was a budgetary issue. And so repurposing means that you have to have an organization. And like I said, we lack capacity in the 7th Ward. We don't have a lot of organizations that can come to the table and be able to address these issues with regard to repurposing a building for another use. The reason why CPS wanted to unload those schools after they were closed is because they have to maintain them, and maintaining costs money. So repurposing them at the city's, from the city's budget perspective, is not going to happen. But we have if you have an organization that is interested in doing that, you know, that is on the table. That's an opportunity. With economic development and jobs, I have no time to address it, but to say that, you know, we're working toward looking at 79th Street as a model as to how we will do things on other corridors throughout the ward.
Thank you so much. Mr. Mitchell?
You know, that was a lot in that question.
Yes, it was.
With respect to the school closing, repurposing of the buildings, that has actually happened in the 7th Ward. There was a CPS-owned Benjamin O. Davis Center, which was repurposed, and now it's a community center. There was my alma mater, Luella Elementary, which was Robert H. Lawrence, was closed, and it was repurposed for another school was moved into there because I guess it was a larger structure, and so now it still remains. They repurposed. I didn't interrupt you, Natashia.
Okay, go ahead, proceed.
But as far as, you know, I would be in favor of research, but if we're going to be 21st century leaders and do things from a 21st century standpoint, a lot of the structures may not be in the best shape or the best structure to implement things for technology solutions and the like. So we would have to look at those buildings and see exactly what we could use them for, which is...
Very good. We're going to allow 60 seconds for your closing statement, what you'd like to leave with the voters as they continue to make their decisions and head to the polls starting on the 23rd of March.
Look, you know, I applied for this job because I wanted to be in a position to affect change for my community. We all here know change doesn't happen overnight, but I'm working to move the 7th Ward forward and for us to be a part of what's happening for Chicago as a global city. I fight for my neighborhood and my community every day, and I've done this not just as alderman, just as a resident, and I want to continue doing this. And I want your vote on April 7th, or if you're going to start on March 23rd, I want your vote so that we can continue to move the 7th Ward forward. So like I've said all along, you know, everybody out here is playing all these political tricks. All you got to do, if you want some real leadership in your ward, is punch 56.
Thank you. Mr. Mitchell?
That was interesting. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've been in this ward all my life, and I've seen a lot of changes. I've seen, you know, changes from the 70s to the 80s, from the 80s to 90s to 100. In a little while, Natasha and I are going to attend a funeral of a young man that was 17 years old, that was on his way to play basketball at Trumbull Park and was shot. That hits me directly because 29 years ago, that was me. That young man does not have an opportunity to go to FAMU like he chose. I was able to go to Grounding. So that hits me, it's particularly hard. And that is one of the things that's compelling me to run for this office and to ultimately make decisions that is the best interest of our ward. She talked about politics, politricks. Okay, well, let's talk about heart. Let's talk about doing a job that is in your heart to do. Let's talk about the job that you wanted to do. I didn't circulate petitions twice, make the ballot twice to get a job. I came to do a job, and all of you know we have a big job to do. So I ask for you both to elect me to give us, our ward, a new beginning. So someone that was raised here, that believes in the community, can start the ball rolling to bring us back.
Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause to our candidates.